The stars burned orange through the thick smoke that poured from the dying planet below. Captain Una pressed her long, pale fingers against the cold metal of the observation deck window. Her home world was ending. Massive black ships moved across the surface like hungry insects. They belonged to the Krex Dominion. The Krex were warriors who lived only to conquer and destroy. They had swept across 7 peaceful worlds in just 3 months. Now they had come for the last stronghold of the Valari Republic. Una watched the city she had grown up in turn to ash. The Krex used weapons that turned everything they touched into burning dust. Her people had no defense against such violence. The Valari had spent thousands of years building art and writing poetry. They had never learned to kill. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in desperate silence. These were the last soldiers of their entire species. Their ship, the Bright Hope, was one of only 5 vessels that had escaped the planet before the Krex arrived in full force. Commander Lyra approached with tears streaming down her face. The Valari had large eyes that showed every emotion. Right now, those eyes held only fear and sadness. Captain, the other ships are requesting orders. Where should we go? What should we do? Una turned from the window. She had been asking herself the same questions for hours. The Valari had no military training. They had no weapons that could hurt the Krex. They had no allies who would stand against such a powerful enemy. But they had to try something. Somewhere in the galaxy, there had to be someone willing to help innocent people. Open a channel to all frequencies. Send our message to every corner of known space. Lyra nodded and moved to the communications station. Her fingers danced across the controls with practiced skill. Within moments, every radio, telescope, and deep space receiver in the galaxy would hear their plea. Una took a deep breath and began to speak. This is Captain Una of the Valari Republic. Our worlds are under attack by the Krex Dominion. They are killing our people. They are destroying our cities. Our children are dying. She paused and looked out at the burning planet again. We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight, but we know how to love and how to create beautiful things. We know how to help others and how to share what we have. If anyone in the galaxy believes that peace is worth protecting, please help us. The message went out across the void. Una waited for responses. The first came from the Centauri Council. They sent their sympathies, but said they could not risk war with the Krex. The Altair Federation offered to take refugees, but would not send ships to fight. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy sent the same message. They were sorry, but they could not help. The Krex were too strong. The risk was too great. Hours passed. The crew of the Bright Hope began to lose hope. They had tried everything. They had begged everyone. No one would come. Then a new signal arrived. It came from a small system at the edge of the galaxy. The database said it was called Earth. The planet was listed as a Class 12, Deathworld. Such places were considered too dangerous for civilized life. The message was short and simple. Earth Coalition Force responding. Hold your position. Help is coming. Una stared at the communication screen. She had never heard of humans or Earth. What kind of beings could survive on a death world? What kind of help could they possibly offer against the mighty Krex Dominion? But it was the only hope they had left. Send our coordinates to Earth. Tell them we will wait. As the Bright Hope drifted in space above her dying world, Captain Una wondered what kind of creatures would answer a desperate call for help. She had no idea that she was about to meet the most dangerous species in the galaxy. 3 days after the message from Earth, the human ships appeared. Captain Una had expected something impressive. After all, these beings had promised to help fight the Krex Dominion. But when the vessels dropped out of hyperspace, she felt her heart skip a beat. The ships were dark and angular. They moved through space like predators hunting prey. There were no bright colors or decorative designs like Valari ships had. These vessels were built for one purpose only: war. The largest ship sent a docking request. Una granted permission even though her crew looked nervous. What choice did they have? The Krex would return soon and the Valari had nowhere else to run. When the airlock opened, Captain Una got her first look at humans. She had studied the basic information in their databases. Humans were bipedal mammals from a death world. But seeing them in person was different. The first human through the door was tall and broad. His skin was darker than hers, and his black hair was cut very short. He wore a uniform that looked both practical and intimidating. Most shocking of all were his eyes. They were small and focused like a hunter examining prey. Captain, you am Admiral Kong of the Earth Coalition Force. We received your distress call. His voice was deeper than any Valari voice. When he spoke, Yuna felt something primitive in her mind telling her to step back. This was a predator. Every instinct she had was screaming danger, but his words were polite and his manner was respectful. Behind him came more humans. A woman with sharp eyes who introduced herself as Colonel Hannah, a younger man called Major Day whose smile seemed friendly but somehow made Yuna more nervous, not less. Thank you for coming, but I must ask, how can you help us against the Kreks? They have the most powerful military in the galaxy. Admiral Kane looked at Colonel Hannah. She nodded and activated a portable display unit. Images of Kreks ships and weapons appeared in the air. We need to understand our enemy. Show us everything you have recorded about their attacks. For the next hour, the humans asked questions that made the Valari uncomfortable. They wanted to know about Kreks' pain responses. They asked about fear reactions and psychological weaknesses. They studied weapon configurations not to understand the technology, but to find ways around the defenses. Lieutenant Tay was particularly disturbing. The young human woman examined footage of Kreks' ground forces with the same expression Yuna might use when studying an interesting painting. But Tay was looking for ways to kill. Their armor has weak points at the joints. Their formation tactics assume enemies will attack from the front. They rely too much on their reputation for fear. Sergeant Bo was examining captured Kreks weapons with obvious excitement. He turned a plasma rifle over in his hands like he was holding a fascinating puzzle. Crude but effective. The power cells have a flaw, though. If you overload the cooling system, the whole weapon becomes unstable. Could cause chain reactions in their armories. The humans spoke about warfare like the Valari spoke about art. They understood violence in ways that frightened and amazed their hosts. But what truly shocked Captain Yuna was how casually they discussed concepts that her people had never even considered. Commander Bin explained the human plan with calm efficiency. They would not simply defend the remaining Valari ships. They would hunt the Kreks fleet. They would make the attackers into the victims. The Kreks think they are apex predators. They have never faced anything from a world like Earth. They are about to learn what real predators look like. Captain Yuna tried to understand these strange allies. During meal breaks, she spoke with different humans. Medic Nay was the most approachable. The human woman treated injured Valari crew members with gentle care that seemed to contradict everything else Yuna had observed. Your world must have been terrible to create beings like you. Nay looked up from bandaging of Valari technicians. Her expression was thoughtful. Earth taught us hard lessons. We learned that the universe is dangerous. Predators exist everywhere. Natural disasters can destroy everything you love in minutes. Disease and starvation and violence are always waiting. She finished the bandage and helped the technician sit up. But Earth also taught us that life is precious. That protecting the weak is what separates intelligence from mere survival. Your people create beautiful things. You deserve to live and grow and continue making beauty. Yuna felt her understanding shift. These humans were not just killers. They were guardians who had learned to kill in order to protect. That evening, Admiral Kong called a final meeting. The human fleet was ready to engage the Kreks. But first, he wanted the Valari to understand what they were about to witness. Your species evolved on a peaceful world. You developed art and philosophy because you never needed to fight for survival. Earth was different. Everything on our planet tried to kill us. The weather, the animals, the diseases, even the ground beneath our feet. He gestured to his officers around the table. We are what millions of years of that pressure created. We are persistence hunters who never give up. We are problem solvers who adapt to any threat. We are pack hunters who work together to bring down prey much larger than ourselves. Colonel Hannah activated the tactical display. It showed the approaching Kreks fleet in red and the human ships in blue. The Kreks have conquered dozens of civilized species, but they have never faced death. They have never fought beings who understand that survival is not guaranteed. that everything you love can be taken away unless you are strong enough to protect it. Captain Una looked at the display. The human fleet was tiny compared to the Krex armada, but somehow she no longer felt hopeless. These humans carried themselves like they had already won, like the outcome was never in doubt. As the meeting ended, Admiral Kong placed a hand on Yuna's shoulder. The gesture was meant to be comforting, but she could feel the strength in his grip. This being could crush her without effort. Captain Krex made one mistake. They threatened a species under human protection. They are about to learn why the galaxy fears Deathworlders. Outside the window, the human ships moved into attack formation. Soon, the hunters would become the hunted. General Vorthok stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the scanner displays with satisfaction. The Krex had crushed another weak species. The Velari Republic was nothing but burning worlds and scattered refugees. Now, soon even those few survivors would be eliminated. His fleet of 200 warships moved through space in perfect formation. Each vessel was armed with enough firepower to level a city. The Krex had built their empire through overwhelming force and brutal efficiency. No enemy had ever stood against them for long. The bridge crew worked in disciplined silence. They had performed this same operation dozens of times. Find the survivors, destroy them completely, move on to the next target. It was simple and effective. General, we are detecting the Velari ships. 5 vessels holding position near the asteroid field. They appear to be waiting for us. Vorthok allowed himself a moment of amusement. The surviving Velari probably thought the asteroids would provide some protection. They had no understanding of real warfare. His heavy cruisers would simply blast through any obstacles and finish what they had started. Prepared to engage. I want those ships destroyed quickly. We have other systems to conquer. But as the Krex fleet closed in, something unexpected happened. New contacts appeared on the scanners. Ships that had not been there moments before suddenly materialized from empty space. The tactical officer's voice carried a note of confusion. General, unknown vessels are appearing throughout our formation. They seem to have been hiding in the gravitational shadows of the asteroids. Vorthok studied the displays with growing concern. The new ships were smaller than his cruisers, but there were many of them. More disturbing was how they had managed to get so close without being detected. Krex sensors were the best in the galaxy. Before he could issue orders, the unknown ships opened fire. The weapons they used were unlike anything in the Krex databases. Instead of the bright energy beams or explosive missiles that most species preferred, these attackers used projectiles that moved faster than anything had a right to move. Solid metal slugs accelerated to impossible speeds, struck his ships before the defensive systems could react. But worse than the weapons was how the enemy fought. They did not attack in neat formations or follow predictable patterns. They moved like a pack of wild animals surrounding injured prey. Ships appeared from impossible angles using gravitational fields and electromagnetic shadows that no civilized species would think to exploit. Captain J led the human stealth squadron with deadly precision. His ships had been designed by engineers who understood that space was not empty. Every asteroid, every gravity well, every radiation field could be used to hide a hunter. The humans had learned to use the universe itself as camouflage. The Krex shields had been built to stop conventional attacks. Energy weapons and explosive missiles were deflected or absorbed easily. But the human weapons bypassed those defenses entirely. Kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through energy barriers like they were made of paper. General Vorthok watched his formation fall apart as ships began exploding around him. The attackers seemed to know exactly where to hit each vessel. Engine compartments erupted in flames. Command centers went dark. Weapon systems failed as power conduits were severed with surgical precision. How are they targeting our weak points so accurately? Our ship designs are classified. His tactical officer was studying the attack patterns with growing horror. General, they are not just attacking weak points. They are attacking in sequence. First, they disable our engines so we cannot retreat. Then they target our weapons so we cannot fight back. Finally, they hit life support systems. The realization hit Vorthok like a physical blow. These attackers were not trying to win a quick victory. They were hunting his fleet systematically. They wanted the Krex to suffer before they died. Engineer Sam had spent weeks modifying human weapon systems using salvaged Krex technology. But it was not the superior firepower that was breaking the enemy fleet. It was the human approach to warfare that the Kreks could not understand or counter. The Kreks had learned to fight other civilized species, enemies who followed rules of engagement and fought with honor. They expected battles to be decided by superior numbers and better technology. They had no experience with predators who fought to survive. Major day-led boarding parties that moved through damaged Krek ships like apex predators stalking prey. His teams did not march down corridors in formation like proper soldiers. They crawled through ventilation systems and moved along exterior holes in vacuum suits. They appeared where no enemy should be able to reach. The Kreks warriors found themselves fighting an enemy that did not behave like any opponent they had faced. Humans moved with the fluid efficiency of creatures that had evolved to hunt much larger prey. They used teamwork and tactics that spoke of millions of years spent bringing down dangerous animals on a hostile world. But what truly broke the Kreks was not the physical assault. It was the growing realization that they were no longer the hunters. For the first time in their species' history, they were the prey. General Vorthok tried to rally his remaining ships, but the human attacks had shattered his communications network. Individual Kreks vessels found themselves isolated and surrounded. The disciplined formation that had conquered worlds was scattered across space. Like leaves in a storm, the humans coordinated their assault with the efficiency of a wolf pack. Each ship knew its role without needing constant orders. They moved as one organism with a single deadly purpose. Captain Una watched the battle from the bridge of the Bright. Hope and fascination and horror. The human fleet was smaller than the Kreks armada, but they fought like they had already won. Every move was calculated to cause maximum damage and maximum fear. She began to understand why the galaxy whispered about Deathworlders in fearful tones. These humans were not just warriors. They were the evolutionary product of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Every adaptation, every instinct, every skill had been honed in the crucible of survival. The Kreks had made the mistake of threatening beings who knew that the universe was already trying to kill them. Now they were learning what real predators looked like. As Kreks ships continued to explode in the darkness of space, General Vorthok finally understood the truth. His species had never been the apex predators they thought they were. They had simply never met anything from a world like Earth. The surviving Krek ships tried to regroup in the shadow of a large asteroid. General Vorthok had lost over half his fleet in the first assault. His remaining vessels were damaged and scattered, but the Kreks were warriors. They would not surrender. Without a fight, all ships formed defensive positions. Prepare for the next attack wave. His communications officer worked frantically to restore contact with the scattered fleet elements. The humans had targeted their relay stations with disturbing precision. It was as if they understood exactly how Kreks military communications worked. Colonel Hannah sat in the command center of the human flagship studying intercepted Kreks transmissions. Her team of analysts had been monitoring enemy communications since the battle began. What they discovered was both useful and fascinating. The Kreks military used a rigid command structure. Orders flowed down from generals to captains to individual soldiers. When those communication links were broken, the entire system failed. Kreks warriors were trained to follow orders, not to think for themselves. Their formation patterns are predictable. They always try to reform into the same defensive configuration. Watch! She pointed to the tactical display where the remaining Kreks ships were moving into a standard defensive formation. It was exactly what the human computers had predicted they would do. Sergeant Yoon began phase 2 of the psychological campaign. Sergeant Yoon smiled as she activated her special equipment. The humans had learned long ago that fear was often more effective than weapons. Her team began broadcasting on all Kreks frequencies. The messages were simple but terrifying. Recordings of human voices speaking in perfect Kreks language. They described in detail what had happened to the destroyed ships. They explained exactly how the remaining vessels would be hunted down and eliminated. But the most disturbing part was how much the humans knew about Kreks culture and psychology. They used specific phrases that triggered deep instinctual fears. They spoke about concepts that civilized Kreks had tried to forget. The effect on the enemy fleet was immediate. Kreks crews who had never experienced real fear began to panic. Their disciplined formations started to waver as individual ships tried to find better positions. General Vorthok watched his fleet's cohesion collapse with growing desperation. His warriors were the finest in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds, but something about these humans was breaking their will to fight. Sir, we are receiving surrender offers from 3 ships in the outer formation. Vorthok could not believe what he was hearing. Krek's warriors did not surrender. It was against everything their species believed. Yet his own subordinates were abandoning the battle. On the human ships, Lieutenant Tay studied the enemy responses with scientific interest. She had spent years learning how different species reacted to stress and fear. The Kreks were particularly fascinating because they had never experienced true predation. Captain Yuna, you should understand what we are doing to them. The Kreks evolved as apex predators on their home world. They have genetic memories of being the hunters, never the hunted. We are forcing them to experience something their species has never faced. Captain Yuna watched the human psychological warfare with mixed feelings. Part of her was horrified by the cruelty of it, but another part was amazed by the effectiveness. How do you know so much about their minds? Lieutenant Tay looked up from her analysis screens with the patient expression of a teacher explaining something obvious. Humans have been both predator and prey for millions of years. We understand fear because we have lived with it our entire evolutionary history. We know exactly which mental triggers cause panic because those same triggers kept our ancestors alive. The human fleet moved in for the next phase of their attack, but instead of the overwhelming assault the Kreks expected, they used smaller groups that struck at random intervals. Never enough ships to win a decisive victory, but always enough to cause damage and retreat before the enemy could respond. Major Day led one of these harassment groups with deadly efficiency. His ships would appear from behind cover fire, a few devastating shots, and disappear again. The Kreks could never predict where the next attack would come from. This was persistence hunting on a galactic scale. The same tactics human ancestors had, used to exhaust much larger prey animals on the African plains. Keep the enemy moving. Never let them rest. Wear them down until they could no longer fight effectively. General Vorthok found himself making increasingly desperate decisions. He divided his remaining fleet to cover more space. He sent ships on wild chases after human raiders. He wasted ammunition on empty patches of space where he thought attackers might be hiding. Each mistake weakened his position further. The humans were not just defeating his fleet, they were teaching him to defeat himself. Engineer Sam monitored the battle from the human command ship with professional satisfaction. His modified weapons were performing better than expected, but the real victory was not coming from superior technology. Admo, the enemy formation is completely broken. Individual ships are making random movements. Some are firing at asteroids thinking they see threats. A few are requesting permission to retreat. Admiral Kong nodded as he studied the tactical display. The Kreks fleet looked like a pack of frightened animals. Their disciplined formations had dissolved into chaos. Their chain of command was failing under pressure. The Kreks have never faced an enemy like us. They built their empire by intimidating civilized species who fought according to rules. We fight like Earth taught us. We fight to survive. Sergeant Bo led another raiding group against a damaged Kreks cruiser. His team moved with the fluid coordination of pack hunters. They knew exactly how to work together without needing constant communication. The Kreks defenders tried to respond, but their training had not prepared them for this type of warfare. They expected enemies to attack from predictable directions using conventional tactics. The humans appeared everywhere and nowhere, following no rules except effectiveness. As the battle continued, Captain Yuna began to understand something profound about her human allies. They were not just skilled warriors, they were the product of a world that had been trying to kill them since the dawn of their species. Every tactic they used, every instinct they followed had been tested in the crucible of survival. They did not fight for glory or conquest. They fought because failing to fight meant extinction. The Kreks had made the mistake of threatening something humans considered worth protecting. Now they were learning why the galaxy feared Deathworlders, not because they were cruel or savage, but because they understood survival in ways that civilized species could never match. In the darkness of space, the hunter had truly become the hunted. The last Kreks warship drifted powerless in space. Its engines were destroyed and its weapons were silent. General Vorthok sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed nothing but wreckage. His mighty fleet was gone. The human ships surrounded his vessel, like predators circling wounded prey. But they did not fire the final shots. Instead, Admiral Kang requested permission to board. Vorthok had no choice but to accept. When the human commander entered the Krex bridge, Vorthok felt something he had never experienced before. True fear, not the excitement of battle or the concern for strategy. This was the deep terror of a creature that knows it is about to die. Admiral Kong looked around the bridge with calm professional interest. His officers spread out to secure the area, but they moved without urgency. The battle was over, and everyone knew it. General Vorthok, I am Admiral Kang of the Earth Coalition Force. You have attacked a species under human protection. Your fleet has been neutralized. Vorthok struggled to understand what had happened. His forces had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never faced defeat like this. The humans had not just won, they had made his warriors afraid to fight. What manner of beings are you? No civilized species fights like this. Admiral Kong studied the Krex general with the same expression he might use when examining an interesting but dangerous animal. We are humans. We come from a world that spent millions of years trying to kill us. Every day was a battle for survival. Every generation had to be stronger and smarter than the last, or they died. He gestured toward the ruined fleet visible through the bridge windows. Your species became apex predators on a world with no serious threats. You learned to dominate through size and strength, but you never learned what it means to truly fight for survival. Captain Yuna watched the exchange from beside Admiral Kang. She had been invited to witness the end of the battle. What she saw troubled her deeply. The human commander spoke to General Vorthok with polite respect, but there was something in his eyes that reminded her of the predators from ancient Velari legends. Stories her people told about monsters that hunted in the darkness. Yet when Admiral Kong looked at her, his expression was completely different. Warm and protective, like a parent watching over a child. The same being could be both monster and guardian depending on circumstances. Admiral Kong, why did you fight so brutally? But now, show mercy to our enemies. The human commander considered her question carefully before answering. Captain, the universe is full of bullies, like the Krex. They prey on those who cannot protect themselves. The only language they understand is overwhelming force. If we had been gentle, they would have seen it as weakness. Medic Nay entered the bridge carrying medical supplies. She began treating wounded Krex crew members with the same careful attention she had shown to injured Velari. Her touch was gentle and her manner was kind. General Vorthok watched in confusion as the human medic worked on his subordinates. These beings had just destroyed his fleet with ruthless efficiency. Now they were saving the lives of his warriors. I do not understand you humans. You fight like demons but act like healers. What do you want from us? Medic Nay looked up from bandaging a Krex soldier's arm. Her expression was patient and sad. We want you to stop hurting innocent people. We want you to understand that strength should be used to protect the weak, not exploit them. She returned to her work as she continued speaking. On Earth, we learned that survival requires both the ability to fight and the wisdom to know when fighting is necessary. Predators who kill everything eventually starve. Civilizations that show no mercy eventually destroy themselves. Admiral Kong walked to the main view screen and activated a communication channel. His message went out to every surviving Krex ship and every monitoring station in the galaxy. This is Admiral Kong of the Earth Coalition Force. The Krex Dominions. Attack on the Velari Republic has been stopped. General Vorthok and his fleet have been defeated. He paused to let that information spread across space. Let this be a message to all species who prey on the innocent. Earth has emerged from isolation. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will stand against any force that threatens peaceful civilizations. The transmission continued. With detailed terms, the Krex would withdraw from all Velari territory. They would pay reparations for the damage they had caused. Most importantly, they would end their expansion into the territories of peaceful species. General Vorthok listened to the terms with growing understanding. The humans were not just ending this battle. They were announcing themselves to the galaxy as a new power, a force that would stand between predators and their prey. Commander Ben approached Captain Yuna with a datapad containing reconstruction. plans, the humans had already begun organizing relief efforts for the surviving Velari worlds. Captain, your people will need time to rebuild. Earth is prepared to provide security during the reconstruction period. We will also share some of our defensive technologies. Yuna accepted the datapad, but her mind was struggling with bigger questions. Commander Ben, why are you helping us? What do humans gain from protecting strangers? The human officer smiled with genuine warmth. Captain, my species learned something important during our long struggle for survival. The strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. Not because we gain something from it, but because it is what separates civilization from barbarism. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Captain Yuna stood on the observation deck watching their ships maneuver. These beings had saved her people from extinction. But more than that, they had given the galaxy something it had never possessed before. Hope. For the first time in galactic history, there was a species willing to stand against bullies and tyrants. The Deathworlders of Earth had announced that peaceful civilizations would no longer face their enemies alone. Admiral Kong's final message echoed across space as the human ships entered hyperspace. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. It should be a place where art and beauty can flourish, where peaceful species can grow and explore and create. Earth will ensure that those who threaten such civilizations will face the consequences of their actions. The transmission ended, but its meaning spread from star to star. The age of unchallenged conquest was over. The Deathworlders had emerged from their isolated system, and they brought with them the most dangerous gift imaginable: justice backed by the power to enforce it. Captain Yuna watched the human ships disappear into the void. Somewhere in the galaxy, other peaceful species were receiving signals for help, and now they knew that someone would answer. The SOS had begged for help. Earth had sent its most dangerous Deathworlders, and the galaxy would never be the same.